All right, Adam, thank you so much. Well, tomorrow, finally, the big day. Voters across our state head to cast their ballot in the South Carolina Republican presidential primary.
And as candidates spend today making their last push in South Carolina to get voters on their side, and new information coming out just about the fundraising details on Nikki Haley and President Trump.
Joining us now in studio, political analyst Joel Sawyer, and via Zoom from Washington, D.C., Antoine C. Wright. Thank you both so much for joining us. Antoine, we started with Joel yesterday, so I'll start with you today. What do you make of the fact that Nikki Haley raised more money than Donald Trump for the first time in this campaign cycle?
I'm not surprised at all. I think what the chattering political class has to understand is the former president is running a political campaign without having to raise money or campaign traditionally. Every time he's on TV, every time the news cycle is dominated by his legal issues, that's campaigning without campaigning. And as a result, all the money he does raise is going towards his legal fees. And so I'm not surprised by the actual number, but numbers do not always translate to votes and do not always translate to political impact. And I think the governor, the former governor of South Carolina and the former ambassador is feeling what that means in real time.
And I want to talk about early voting numbers, Joel. We finally have the early voting numbers from the Republican presidential primary. 205,000, close to 206,000, large numbers there. What could that preview about the Haley and Trump matchup here in South Carolina?
So it's hard to say because, we have expanded early voting in this state. So we don't know, how many of those 205,000 people are people that would have just voted Saturday anyway. In other words, is this additive, or are these people that are largely going to be voting anyway? Now, I will say this, is that the higher the turnout, I believe, helps Nikki Haley more, because as we've seen in these other states, she is dominated by President Trump among strictly Republican voters, but in places where she's been able to get independent support and Democratic support, remember South Carolina is an open primary state, it has helped her buoy her numbers. So the more people we have show up, the more I think it's probably going to help her in the end.
And let me ask you about the fundraising dynamic. In Nikki Haley raising more than Donald Trump at this for the first time in this campaign cycle, but also, Joel, in different circles today, I was in earshot. I was not eavesdropping, but I could hear other conversations, and people were saying that they had liberal friends, Democratic friends who are voting in this primary.
Right.
So how big of a factor do you think that will be as well?
It could be huge. Like I said, if a couple 100,000, non-traditional Republicans or independents, Democrats show up to vote for Nikki Haley, do I think that's necessarily going to put her over 50%? Might be a little bit of a stretch, but could it get her into the 40s where it's a much more respectable number? I think it absolutely could.
Very interesting. Also, we know that right now Trump is in Rock Hill, York County. Nikki Haley was in the low country of Moncks Corner earlier today. How important is it that they are in those specific locations? Do they feel like they could possibly get more votes in those areas, or is it just how the campaign trail just ended up?
You hope so. I mean, look, at this point, it's largely kind of written in terms of, in terms of what's going to happen. I mean, you are trying to remind those people last minute, hey, there is a vote tomorrow. This is not November, but there is a primary tomorrow. It's very important that you show up. So you're trying to get in front of as many South Carolinians, as many South Carolina voters as you possibly can in these last couple hours. That's really all you can do. I mean, a lot of the stuff that has been done up until now in terms of the mail program and the advertising program and some of your get out the vote efforts, it's already done. There's not much else you can do besides just encourage people one more time to show up.
All right, let's take a quick break. Antoine, when we come back, I want to get your thoughts on the Black Conservative Gala that's happening in Columbia tonight, where former President Trump is going to deliver the keynote address. We'll be right back with much more on WYS at 5:30.
We are continuing our conversation just a day ahead of the Republican presidential primary. We are talking to our political analyst, Antoine C. Wright from Washington, D.C., and Joel Sawyer live with us in studio. An event happening tonight, an interesting one that we want to get to because I don't think most people know about it.
Well, I certainly have never heard about it, which doesn't mean that it did not exist. But Antoine, I think it's fair to say a lot of people in the community, a lot of people have been asking us about the Black Conservative Gala. What is it, and who are the people that are helping to put it on? What's your insight and any information that you can share about it with us?
Beats the hell out of me about this group and its function and functionality tonight. What we do know is in 2016, when he was running for president, I think it was Texas, Donald Trump made a clarion clarion cry to black voters saying, what in the hell do you have to lose? That was his language. I hope my mother doesn't spank me as a result of my language here today. That was his language. And as a result, he was able to garner a significant portion of African American men. I don't think this event is about garnering support in Columbia, South Carolina. In fact, I doubt that most of the people in the room tonight will be from South Carolina. I do think this is the former president trying to send a message about the days and weeks and months ahead of this campaign. What I would be curious to know is when did this group started? What has been their function and flow before now? And why is the former president courting them in South Carolina, of all places? Here's what I know as a black voter, 38 years old, from rural South Carolina, who lives in rural South Carolina too. At the end of the day, the black vote, the net worth of our vote has been consequential in every election. So all these groups are coming to try to pimp our vote in every effort and every which way they can. But historically, what we have proven is we do not vote lightly. Our vote should not be taken for granted. And you can't bojangle us the day before an election and expect that you're going to make certain that we show up to vote for you. Donald Trump has a track record of being reckless when it comes to black and brown issues, in particular black issues. And I think you're going to see that play out long term in November.
Joe, I love your insight on this as well. Are you familiar with the group? Any insight on why Trump would be courting, as Antoine put it, and hosting this group here in South Carolina?
I've never heard of the group. I'm not familiar with it. I can tell you from my time in Republican politics, there have been, obviously various efforts over the years, and I'll call it what it is, like largely lip service to engage black voters.
Mm-hmm.
Antoine is absolutely right about one thing, is that you can't approach black voters, or really any constituency, a month or a week before the election and say that I take you seriously. I mean, it's something that takes years and years and years to build. And what the Republican Party, unfortunately, has chosen to do is focus on its core constituencies rather than expand to new constituencies. I will be very curious to see who is there tonight. I suspect that it is probably a little bit more about, the visual rather than necessarily turning out votes. I don't know how many people will be there. As Antoine said, I don't know how many people will be there from South Carolina. Right. So in terms of getting in front of South Carolina voters, something that we talked about, in just the last segment, we'll have to see here in about 30 or 40 minutes how that shakes out.
We will indeed, and we are working to have coverage from that event tonight. We did reach out because we wondered if there were any local organizers as a part of the Black Conservative Gala. We were not able to make any local connections. It seemed like most of the organizers were out of D.C., but we wanted to give them equal time to be able to share their information, their platform, what brings them here to South Carolina. And so whatever we're able to learn from them, we will certainly have on WYS tonight. Antoine, thank you for making the time, for joining us from Washington, D.C. Joel, always great to have you in studio as well. We'll be back at it over the weekend with election analysis right here on WYS News 10.
Yes, don't forget the primaries tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you are in line before 7 p.m., you can still vote and join us live right here on WIS TV. We're going to have digital coverage before the primaries close, and then afterwards as well. We have you covered on every ground. We want to take a quick break. We'll be right back.